Good afternoon. My name is Turner Bitten. I'm the executive director here at Westview Media. Today, we'd like to welcome you to the next event in our City Talk series. Today, we're joined by Jessica Waters. Welcome, Jessica.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, a couple of housekeeping items before we have Jessica introduce herself. Jessica and I are the only ones here on the Zoom conversation. If you have questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. And we'll get to as many of them as we can today. To get started, Jessica, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like Turner mentioned, I'm Jessica Waters. I'm the social work director for our social work program in the Salt Lake City Police Department. So our team has the co-responder program. I have worked here at this position for the last 5 years when City Council first created our positions. I've worked a lot in mental health and homelessness in St. Louis and Chicago and Indianapolis before moving out here to Utah. And I got my master's of social work at the University of Utah in social work. That's just a brief little bit about me.
Well, thank you. And I think to get started, why don't you explain what the co-responder model is so that makes sense to folks as we ask the next couple of questions.
Right, yeah, so co-response is the idea of having a mental health professional, social worker respond with an officer to 911 related calls. And so that may be mental health, substance use, suicide, homelessness, what you would imagine a social issue to be through 911. So you call 911 and say, there's someone talking to themselves in the middle of the street. That will go out over the air on dispatch. And then our team, what we call ourselves as a co-responder, meaning two partners responding together, a social worker and an officer. We have CIT, crisis intervention officers, who are on our team, and we respond to those calls together as a pair in hopes that we can figure out some more long-term solutions for individuals experiencing crisis.
Thank you. I think that was a pretty good summary of the program. I'm going to still ask the next question, which is pretty closely related, but can you give a little bit of an overview, maybe a day-to-day look at what some of the responses you do look like for your program?
Right. Every day is always different. That's one of the things that we love about the job. Depending on the weather, depending on what's happening in the city, my team comes in at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. Unfortunately, we are not 24/7. We're hoping to become 24/7 someday. We don't have enough staffing yet. So we are 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. So usually at 6 o'clock, we're trying to do some little documentation unless a mental health call comes in over the air. So a call may come over the air that there's an unwanted homeless camp on someone's property. So our team will go out there, offer services, notify the individuals they can't be camping there, but still trying to engage with housing or mental health resources. And then there may be another call that comes out that there's someone experiencing suicidal ideation. They're going to do something to themselves, and then our team would go to that. Some of these calls can take 20 minutes, and then some can take 4 hours. If we have to take someone to the hospital and get them admitted, it can take a long time waiting there and trying to make sure everything is clear, or it can be pretty quick. And then in the downtime, if there's no active mental health related calls happening, we do follow-up work, meaning that if a graveyard officer goes on a call that someone was experiencing mental health crisis, they write a report and it goes to our unit. So we'll go out and we'll follow up with people who may have encountered police recently because of a mental health episode and see if they need any more resources or if they need housing or medication or therapy. And so in the downtime, we'll follow up on those cases. And then along with that follow-up, we follow those who are the top utilizers of 911 in hopes to engage with them and get them connected to services. Well, the day looks different every day.
I can imagine. And it sounds like you have a very wide range of issues that you respond to. Mm-hmm. To give folks just a quick understanding, what is, in your view, what is the most important thing that folks should know about your program?
Yes, there's a lot of important things to know, but I definitely think one of the things is to know that our program is free of cost. I think some people are afraid that they will have to pay in order to get like a co-responder team to come out. And so I think the biggest thing is to know that we are free of cost, and also we work closely with University of Utah, their Mobile Crisis Outreach Team, MCOT. And so our dispatch centers work together to figure out who's the best team to go out on a call. And so I think a lot of things that has been misinterpreted is the fact that maybe we would charge to have a social worker on scene, but we do not charge. We are free of cost, and we will serve anyone and everyone. We don't just serve people of low income or of experiencing homelessness. We'll serve any and everyone visiting or living in Salt Lake City.
Well, thank you. And as you've been talking, I had a question kind of come up. As you receive calls, are those calls that come through 911, or do you have your own separate line?
Yes, we do have our own line. It is 801-799-3533. But the calls that we are going out on are 911 calls. So a lot of times people will call our main line to give a referral or to ask for services, so we can help direct people to the right place. But these are coming through 911 as the emergency line that we respond to that go over the air through dispatch.
Thank you. And are you dispatched on both non-emergency line and 911 calls?
Yes. So if you call a non-emergency in, dispatch will decide if that is an emergency. So even if you call in as a non-emergency and they see it as a priority, they will switch it to an emergency and then call out teams. So we will do that. Most of our time is spent on those emergency 911 calls, but then we will get those referrals from the non-emergency. But most of the time, those mental health crises end up getting transferred to the emergency line versus the non-emergency.
Thank you. So the next thing is, I guess, looking at what are some important projects or priorities that your program has. Are you in an expansion mode right now? Has COVID interrupted or changed the way that you're doing work? I'd kind of like to dive into that type of thing. What projects are you working on right now?
I think, a big project right now across the US, even in itself, is just figuring out mental health and police response. So our police department, we are embedded in the police department. That's been a huge focus lately to really highlight and see what we can do in the mental health world. Is that training more officers in crisis intervention? Is that getting more civilian social workers in the police department? Is that getting teams together? So I feel like our team is really focusing and trying to figure out what's the best solution for us in Salt Lake City, because every city is so different. And with COVID, our team was still responding. Even though a lot of teams may have went virtual, our team was still in person for a good chunk of time. And we have seen, a rise in some mental health calls. And so we're really trying to make a focus to still be out there and be present. With COVID, it was definitely interesting. My team went out and did homeless outreach to those experiencing homelessness to check if they were symptomatic, to educate about COVID, to get them services they needed if they were experiencing COVID symptoms. So my team was definitely on the front lines when COVID first started and going out to those homeless camps. We partnered with Salt Lake County Health Department, and we brought nurses out with us so they could check in on people.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to give you a break for just a second because I've asked a bunch of questions in quick succession. If you're watching the live stream on Facebook and you have questions for Jessica, please feel free to submit them, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. My next question is, after Operation Rio Grande, it seems that a lot of camps and folks who may benefit from your services have kind of been spread out throughout various neighborhoods. We've certainly noticed that here on the west side, that there tends to be more people kind of spread out within the neighborhoods, and just wondering how that has impacted your ability to reach folks in crisis.
Yeah, it's been, really interesting, and it's crazy to think Operation Rio Grande was in 2017. And then now with the road home physically being closed down and torn down and the new resource centers, we're still figuring out as a community of how to get people into those resource centers for shelter beds, and also with outreach teams. So we also work really closely with Volunteers of America, their homeless outreach team. And so often we're communicating together like, hey, I'm trying to find John Doe. He has an apartment, but he had to be moved to a different location. He couldn't camp there. So now we're trying to figure out where they're at. And so We also, I know you guys will be talking to Michelle Hoon later, and she does a lot of the camp stuff, and she gets notification of where there's camps at, and her team communicates with us closely to say, hey, there's a lot of people in this area. Have you guys engaged with them? And so with the city, they like to reach out to us and VOA. So they're getting live updates from the community as you guys kind of submit and tell the city there's a camp close by on my property. They decide, do we need to send an outreach team out there? Or if someone calls 911, that will go through 911 and we get to go and respond to those homeless camps. So it's been interesting for sure. This time of year is always different. More people are likely to be out in tents versus in shelter, just because it warms up and you prefer to have your own space and throw COVID into it. So I think we're going to be seeing more people just because the weather, that always has a huge impact on it. But yeah, it's been interesting to still figure out, how do we engage with people? How do we keep track where people are at? And also, how do we make sure that they feel safe wherever it is that they're camping out at?
Thank you. One question that has come in from a viewer named Paul. Paul asks if you ever respond without police, or do you only ever respond with an officer?
Right, great question. So that's the biggest difference between us and the mobile crisis outreach team through University of Utah. So University of Utah, their MCOT team, they respond with civilians. They don't have officers. For our team, we're unique in the fact that we always respond with an officer unless it's a follow-up call. So if I am out on a 911 call with this individual, we take them to the hospital. The next day I go up to the hospital and visit them. I'm not going to be taking officers with me to do that, or I take them and apply for housing. These aren't immediate crisis calls that we will do follow up without officers. But if it is a 911 call, because they're so unpredictable, and many of the calls that we have coming out, there may be a risk of a weapon or prior violence. And so that's why we go out with an officer. And I'm sure this question will come up too. I feel like it's been really interesting as a social worker working in the police department, because I always expected people to not like cops or not be receptive to seeing a cop on scene. And sometimes it's the opposite, where people don't want to see the social worker. And they would rather talk to the cop than the social worker. So that's something that surprised me coming into this job, because I expected always want to talk to a social worker. And sometimes no, I'd rather talk to the cop. And I think it's important. We have 4 detectives on our squad and 1 sergeant. So it's the same officers we respond out to 911 calls with. That's important because many people who engage with 911 may engage with them multiple times. And so they become familiar with seeing the same detective over and over again versus a new cop every time we respond out to them. So I think that's really important, is that we do respond together for the safety component, because a lot of the calls we have may have a weapon or prior violence.
That makes sense. To follow up on what you mentioned about someone not wanting to speak with a social worker, that seems a little unique to me. I didn't expect that, that comment. What do you think drives that, or what kind of creates that sentiment that someone wouldn't want to speak with a social worker?
I guess, if you ever imagine in your head, just picture a social worker. What do you picture? Many times people picture DCFS taking children away. That is almost always the initial reaction I get if someone said, if I'm I'm a social worker, a lot of people initially think you're going to try and take my children away, no matter what the circumstance is. And I even will think that as a social worker too. That's what I viewed these social workers as before becoming one. So I think that's a common misconception, is that you're a social worker, you're going to take children away. Oh, wow. You're just in here to stir the pot and not really be helpful. So that's been my experience, is clients stating, all I could think of was DCFS, you're going to take children away. Or if someone is in mental health crisis and they may be experiencing delusions, meaning, they think their neighbor is stalking them, they think their neighbor is following them, and a social worker shows up, that feels frustrating, because you feel like your life is in danger because your neighbor's stalking you, and you have a social worker here who's not going to solve anything legally. So there is that frustration in the mental health world of, I want a cop will make me feel safe if I'm experiencing, a mental health crisis. So sometimes people feel like, what is a social worker going to do? I need the cop to arrest this person or protect me. But yeah, kind of like you said, Turner, it shocked me. I didn't expect it. But then it was like, it kind of makes sense as I've seen it over the years now.
Well, that's very interesting. And I imagine that being a social worker and being a police officer, that you are dealing with the same issues, but you maybe come at them from different perspectives.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you would share what you think the value of having both a social worker and a police officer respond to maybe a mental health crisis or something like that. Is there value in the co-responder model that doesn't exist if you don't have both law enforcement and the social worker?
Yes, and there's many things I think many of the public don't see happening day to day, so it's hard to understand why would a cop need to be there. So a good example might be we have someone who's suicidal. They want to jump off of something. Me as a social worker, I can respond. I can talk to them. Sometimes you can only talk for so long, and someone has their mindset. And as a social worker, you never touch clients. You don't touch. You don't go hands on. So that's a perfect example where I can talk all day long. I'm not going to pull them off of the edge because for me, I would end up being the one falling over. I'm not tactical. And so that's what's important is having the officer there where they could intervene and pull the person off the edge, which we've had happen multiple times where we've tried to talk, we've tried to engage. And then at one point, an officer had to pull them off of the side. So that's something I never considered before coming into this job, that, going hands on in that way to pull someone off the edge. And also too, I think in the mental health world, there is a lot of risk for your own safety as a social worker. There's many things you don't think about. I think as a social worker and officer responding, we are playing devil's advocate to each other constantly. Like, hey, this is my idea on this. Like, but did you think about this legal factor that comes in? Or did you think about this trauma factor that plays into this? And so our team, it's fun because we all get to challenge each other and have these hard conversations and see like how we feel about things and what our stance is, and just our comfort level with stuff. And so we do see differently on some stuff, but a lot of times we still come to the same decision. Sometimes you'd be surprised it's the social worker who's advocating to take someone to jail over the officer. Very rarely is it the officer who says we need to take them to jail. Usually ends up being one of our social workers, which is bizarre. But sometimes that's our last resort to get someone stable because we've tried every route and we've burned every route and there's no other option. And I think that surprises people to hear that. It's usually the social worker who says, I think it's time we take them to jail. We need to get their court stuff figured out and they need to get stabilized. So I think that's a different component to it.
That's very interesting. And I'm going to shift us in a little bit of a different direction because that got me thinking about my next question. I'm going to jump to a 10,000-foot view, if you will. But
yes,
as the director of the social work program, what is kind of your philosophy or approach to directing the program?
I think that's a great question. I think constantly analyzing it. I think since we're only 5 years old, we're a young program, and especially in the government world, that's very young. I think constantly being open to change because we're not set in stone. Things are always evolving. Our world's evolving, culture's evolving, and policies are changing and laws are changing. So I think for me, my stance is always being open to new changes or creative ways of doing it because as we do stuff, we run into barriers, run into problems. So we still need to be creative and be willing to adjust. So the biggest thing for us is being flexible. I think that's really important in my role as a director, is to be flexible and be creative and trying to play around with what we're doing and how we can meet the needs of the city in the best way possible.
Thank you. As a little bit of a follow-up question, I'm wondering if you mentioned you've been with the program since the very beginning. What kind of lessons learned or changes have you made over the last 5 years to evolve as you've been the director?
So many lessons. It's painful how many lessons. I think it was just a big lesson coming in as a civilian and learning, the policing world and realizing just how much we aren't funding mental health, substance use, and housing at a state level, that it ends up falling on police. But I think the biggest lessons learned for creating our program is making it clear of what we do. I do feel like, with us focusing on mental health, sometimes we can get pulled in too many directions. And at the beginning of our program, we were open to doing anything and everything, to the point where we had no time to do any of it. There was just too many things to get done, and we didn't feel like we were being successful or actually helping people out. So we had to backpedal and say, this is what is the biggest need right now, is this mental health and response on 911 calls. So we need to not do this and this and this and this and this, so that way we can actually be successful in this. And I also think too of like budget, understanding grants. One of our biggest lessons learned is like having ballistic vest. We used to not go out with ballistic vest. We just went in casual clothing, and there's a huge risk to us by not wearing ballistic vest. And so now we wear those. But there's so many lessons that we've learned. I could write pages on that one.
Well, thank you. And you touched on a subject that I was going to bring up later, but I think is important to address now. You mentioned ballistic vests. What other types of safety precautions do you take for your employees? And one of my other concerns is the mental health for your employees. What do you do to kind of promote the mental well-being of the folks that work with you?
And I appreciate you asking that, because in the mental health world, that's so often overlooked, is the mental health professionals and what they're doing for themselves. Thankfully, in the police department, we have an employee assistance program, so we can get free therapy sessions. We have our own peer support in-house. So if you're experiencing your own crisis, or you want another, teammate to talk to about, and you can go through them. And these are different people in our organization who have done training to be a peer support specialist. And also for me as a supervisor, and I have a manager as well, we do check-ins with our staff, especially if there is a very heavy case that happens that day. We like to debrief the day of. If there is a big thing, sit down, let's debrief what's going on, checking in on people. But then we also do monthly check-ins, sometimes weekly check-ins, one-on-one, just to see how people are. And then your first part too is like the safety precautions. We wear ballistic vest. We also, almost all my team has been pepper sprayed, so that we can carry pepper spray. Worst pain in my life is getting pepper sprayed. And so we can carry pepper sprayed for worst case scenario, haven't had to use it. And then we also carry Narcan for overdoses. All of our officers carry that as well. And then we have done some defensive tactic training, where, ground fighting is what you'd call it. We've done a little bit of that in case there was an emergency that I was stuck in, and how to get out of that. So we're still playing around with like safety and trainings of what more can we learn, and what more can we do to be prepared.
Well, thank you. That's helpful. My next question, I'm going to go back to my pre-prepared questions. I always like to end on a positive note. So what can you share a story of success or something that has inspired you in the last 5 years of your work with the city?
Yeah. There's been a lot of really inspirational stories where you're just like, wow, that was incredible. And all of it has came from my team of social workers. They're incredible. A lot of my case managers have 15 plus years of experience. But one specific story I can think of was someone experiencing homelessness. She had a lot of medical conditions going on. She was wheelchair bound. She couldn't get around. She was a victim to assaults. And she had mental health happening too. And so it took a lot of work. We have many of these cases. It took many months of just working with hospitals, working with the state hospital, working with Salt Lake legal defenders on her legal cases. We were able to get her the medical care that she needed. She usually was getting kicked out of hospitals due to her mental health and becoming violent, and then she would end back up on the street. So she'd try and get help, get kicked out. She's restricted from all these hospitals in the Valley. And so we work with many of these unique cases where you're kicked out, restricted, you've burned all your bridges. And so with this case, we were able to work with a hospital who was willing to try and take her on one more time, get her the medical care that she needed and the mental health care. And then she went to the state hospital to get stabilized. Once she was stabilized, she was able to move into her own housing, her own apartment, and She's lived there ever since, and that's been about 3 years. And she's very happy, very satisfied. It took a lot of work. I think before we had intervened, she had, I think it was like a cost of over $150,000 just in ambulance costs, not even including firefighters responding, police responding out, and people would call 911 on her multiple times a day. And so that's one story that was like, it was a lot of hard work, but we were able to do it. It took a whole team effort and a lot of agencies to help us out to get her there.
Well, thank you. And I imagine that that's only one case in many cases that have ended positively.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier constantly evaluating your program to be successful, and just wondering what success looks like for you. Is it each individual case, or do you have some strategic goals that are kind of larger than one individual case?
Yes. So we have monthly goals to respond to, if that's at least 20 patrol 911 calls and have over 100 contacts with people. So we have physical numbers that we try and reach to like succeed in meeting those goals with the numbers. But that doesn't always mean it's success. And I'm glad you asked that, because many people ask, how do you know you're successful? Like, what's your success rates and all that? And it's really hard to define success in the mental health world, because success may be, housing someone. That's a beautiful success. Getting someone in the substance use treatment, having them sober. Sometimes success is just having someone engage with you. They've been out on the streets for years and they won't talk to anyone. Never talk to anyone, will ever accept food or water. And success may be that they just accept that water bottle from you, and then they finally start talking to you slowly. And that's really, sometimes that's like the biggest success, but you can't see that in a number form. So we do submit stats and data, our monthly stats, and how many people we interact with, how many calls we do, what we help with. But there's so much of the story that's missing in that number. It may say, 80 mental health, and you're like, oh, that's cool. But 80 mental health may be, we were able to divert people from the hospital 20 times and get them on their medications, or we were able to provide one-on-one therapy appointments. So success is dependent off of each individual. We do have our goals that we want to reach, but success is really another way to define success for us. Maybe if they're a top utilizer 911, they have over 40 911 calls on them. Success may be that we work for 5 months straight on this person, get them the services they need, get them the mental health care that they really want and desire, and then now they're not calling 911 anymore. That's a success on that client themselves, that they don't have to engage with police. So it's hard to define it. Like, there's no one, like, this is success and that applies to everyone. There's definitely different levels of it.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to give you a break again really quick and just remind folks, if you're watching live and you have a question, I am at the end of my pre-prepared questions. I have a couple of more that were jogged by the conversation, but we are dependent on audience engagement. So if you have questions, now is the chance to submit them in the chat. My next question is a little bit of a functional question, but within the police department, who do you report to, and kind of how is that structured within the department?
Yeah, so I report to a captain. So my captain is the captain of the Central Patrol Division. And so I report to him, and then he reports to a deputy chief, and then to assistant chief and the chief. So it is different where I report to an officer, but for my team, I have a social worker who reports to me, and then our social work manager who reports to me, and then all of the social workers report to her and I. And so it is unique of, that was a big adjustment, like when you mentioned lessons learned, that was a big adjustment of being a civilian. And I think for the officers to have a civilian be reporting to them who's, specializing in mental health, and just our own code of ethics and their own ethics and licensure and what we need with our license. I know for the police department, they've done a great job of adapting and learning. And I feel like we have also adapted and learned too. But yeah, I report to a captain who's over a patrol division. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. My next question, Salt Lake City Police Department was recently certified as being sensory inclusive. Was
Mhm.
your program involved in that? And if you can, what does that mean in a nutshell?
Yeah. So yeah, like that was just recently released earlier this week, or was that yesterday? No, last week it was released. And so sensory inclusion, it was a training that the entire department, civilian and police, underwent, that had to do with if it was someone with intellectual disability or autism or maybe seizures, anything sensory you can think of, and how someone may respond in a crisis. And so our team is a part of a lot of those trainings. This one specifically, our team did not do the training. We had an outside agency come and do it, and it was great. It was a really great training. Um, but our team will also help out with our crisis intervention training. We help put on those trainings. We help assist in that, or any of the mental health stuff, be a part of those discussions. But with that sensory inclusion one, that was more of educating and understanding, how do you respond? What's the most appropriate way to respond? Say you don't know what someone's diagnosed with, you see they're in crisis, you see, the lights are irritating them or the sound is bothering them. What can you do to help them in that moment of distress? And here are some tools of how you can best do that. If that is, a fidget spinner, or if that is putting headphones on, or if you're nonverbal and you need to point at a picture and say what you need. It was just kind of helping educate how best can you respond and assist someone in that crisis.
Well, thank you. And when I saw that news, I was excited about it.
Yeah.
The next question I have, it's probably a little bit of a strange question, but as I've been thinking about what you've been saying, I've thought about 911 dispatchers and kind of the way that you all receive information. So I'm wondering if you have advice for folks, if you had someone in your family who has neurological differences or something like that, what kind of information is helpful for your team to have if someone did, say, call 911 or need to report an incident? What are some things that the public can share that is helpful for your team?
Yeah, so 2 points on that one. I'm glad you brought that up. So one is, if you do have to call on a 911 on yourself or a family member, the more details, the better. Many times you'd be surprised, you get a 911 call that says someone's yelling at themselves in the street, and that's all it says. There's no details. And that you roll up and they have two machetes in their hand. Or vice versa, you just hear someone has two machetes. You don't hear, oh, they have a history of schizophrenia and they don't like when there's lights, or, so if you ever have to call in a 911, I think it's really important to give as much detail as you can. That helps me as a social worker, and it helps the officers. Because like I said, so many times the calls are so vague, you're like, I have no idea what that means. There's a lot of room for like discretion and openness. So very important, if you ever have to call in, give as much detail as possible. This person dislikes females. Females will trigger them. That helps so much, because we'll learn when we get on scene, we'll figure that out. But if we knew that in advance, that would help alleviate that. So just those little details go a long way. And then two, we're still working through the details of this, but we did create a form online where you can submit information. We're still finalizing like the grant and approval for all this, but we've created a form where you can submit, say, if you have a family member with intellectual or autism or is on the spectrum, that you can submit information that says they love water. This is where they live. This is their description. If they were to ever be missing, they usually are drawn to trains, or they're drawn to water, or they don't like loud noises and they're going to stay far away from loud noises and go somewhere dark. And so that will be online on the Salt Lake City Police Department website page. And I want to say it'll be under resources tab, and it's like reports, and then it'll pop up to give information. It's not all completely smooth yet, but that is an option to be able to do that.
Great. And as you've been mentioning this, folks listening may wonder, well, I'm submitting a lot of personal information. What level of privacy or confidentiality comes with your services and your response?
Yeah, so by submitting that online, that will go to the police department. And so that goes into the policing system. So that not all the details will be, but it may say mental health, like that will be flagged on there, and then we can go and get that in case of an emergency. They're not going to just be accessing that because they want to check it out. It's because they're going to a call related to you or your family member that they're pulling that up. Now that is like what you, like you said, like that's like a willingly submitting that. And I understand there's a lot of like discomfort in that. And so if there ever is discomfort, I would say definitely reach out, talk about it, feel it out. It is more of a preventative measure, knowing that if your family member were to engage with 911, it's the hope that preventative measure helps out. And then also with our own unit, whenever we do engage with someone, we keep our own documentation separate in our own system. So police don't have access to our system as social workers. We have a totally separate system that we document in, and then that helps, maintain confidentiality, privacy. We will have people sign releases. I do think it's important for people to understand too with HIPAA, that's the Privacy Act, the Medical Privacy Act, that there are times in crisis where, maybe a hospital has to release information because your life is in danger. And so that's in moments like that, that information is shared unless you've already signed a release of information saying that I allow them to have that information.
Well, thank you so much. And this has been a really, really illuminating conversation. And I have one final question. What is a good way that citizens or residents of Salt Lake City can support your team and the work that you all are doing?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's great. I think, well, one, using us, using our team when you feel like we'd be appropriate to be there on scene, using us. And then two, I'll always budget wise that if the community members feel like it is a program to support, I'm always game for helping with support budget wise. But I think also helping educate your friends, your family, whatever you've learned so far, I think it goes a long ways to help educate everyone to know the service is available. You can get this. I think it's a big way to support our team is to educate, share the information, and it helps the community to better understand that. And I think too of like reaching out, like it is always helpful. We do get feedback from the community of, hey, one of your social workers and officers was on scene. That was so great. Like I never realized they could help figure this out. Or they were on scene. I wasn't a fan of the interaction and here's why. We're always open to that feedback, positive or negative.
Well, thank you. And my last question for you is a little bit of a weird one, but is there a question I should have asked you today that I didn't ask you?
Question you should have asked that maybe you didn't. I think, I don't know if that's a good question. The only thing I can think of is, because there's the conversation of why don't we pull police completely and just send social workers to these calls? That would be a dream that officers don't have to respond to homeless calls, mental health calls, substance use calls. And I, decades down the road, I hope we're there someday where we don't have to have that. But in the meantime, people are still experiencing crisis and we can't pull officers from responding to those calls because no one can respond. So for me, I feel like maybe a question you didn't ask was, what are like the biggest issues I see like today and like mental health and stuff, or like where are the biggest downfalls or barriers? And for me, I feel like funding is a big barrier at the federal and state level. And because funding is a barrier for housing, mental health, affordable medical care, because funding is lacking in those areas, it becomes a police problem, which is unfortunate because police came into this to catch a bad guy, and someone in a crisis, they're not a bad guy, but there's no one else in the community responding to these. So for me, my biggest thing is support state and federal funding initiative to support affordable housing, mental health, substance use, and that helps alleviate a lot of these crisis calls if we're funding these programs on top.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a really great note to end on. We haven't received any additional audience questions, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up the live stream. But I wanted to say thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for the work you do in our city.
Yes, thank you.
All right, take care. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.